Hi guys. Today I want to do a weird discussion about what do Asians think of American cars. Now, for those of you who are Asians, you would have known what I'm talking about, because most of us, we buy Japanese cars. There are some Korean cars around, and then it's all German premium, or even the French, right? We have Peugeots running around, Renaults, which you guys don't get in US. Or wait, why am I addressing this to Americans? But generally speaking, the only car brand that has any sort of presence, I mean we're in Malaysia, most of my viewers would know, but for those of you who are not from Malaysia, yes, I'm from Malaysia, and above us is Thailand, and then below is Singapore. Okay, we are Southeast Asians, for those of you Trump supporters. No, joking. So for us, the only really brand that has always been around us is Ford. Okay, of course we know about Chevrolet as well, but the Chevrolets that were sold here, most of them are the lousy ones, you know. It's not that those cars are lousy, but compared to what Chevrolet has, or the illustrious history of the Chevy brand Chevrolet, we get things like rebatch Daewoo's or contract manufactured cars from the South Korean Daewoo plant. So we get the small Chevys, you know, the Chevrolet Cruze. We get things like the Chevrolet Sonic, and yeah, we have the Colorado, but the Colorado that we have here is actually an Isuzu D-Max. So and then we have the at one point we have the Opel Zafira, which became the Chevrolet Zafira. They never bothered to even give it a different brand. They just changed the badge. So when it comes to badge engineering or badgineering, I would say, I would rank, in my impression, okay, I would rank GM or Chevrolet as one of the worst, because they couldn't care less. To them, they just slap the badge on and then call it a day off. Of course, we know about the legendary Chevrolet Corvettes, you know, the and of course the from Transformers, a lot of Malaysians or Asians or Southeast Asians get to know the Camaro, right? But other than that, we have very little exposure to American cars. In fact, the stuff that we get are usually the ASEAN specials, or those made for European markets, the smaller American cars. The real American cars were never truly available officially in our streets. Let's not talk about back in the 60s or 50s, you know, or even the 40s, where you have left-hand drive car and right-hand drive cars all being sold together. None of those homologation or whatever going on back then. So our market, if you look around, is mostly just Japanese cars and Japanese cars and Japanese cars, and then some, if you're in the big cities, you get some premium German cars, and other than that, there aren't many. Ford sells in considerable numbers here as well, not in the realms of Honda or Toyota, you know, or our locally Malaysian made cars. Ford, if I'm not wrong, they sell about 10,000 cars a year in Malaysia, which is a small figure for you guys in US, of course, or those in China or bigger markets. But most of them are the Ford Ranger. Yep, Ford Ranger, one model, upheld the entire Ford franchise in Malaysia. Basically, the Ford Focus doesn't sell. The Ford Fiesta, now the Ford Fiesta was a big break for Ford in Malaysia. When they introduced their car, they created a fantastic marketing campaign it captured so much imagination, and it became rather successful. You know, it sort of molded the Ford brand into a young, chic, happening brand. The kind of branding that sort of Mercedes-Benz in Malaysia is doing now. Yeah, for their smaller A segment cars, for Mercedes-Benz. So the Ford Fiesta actually caught on, but it was marred by a horrible after sales experience, and then the twin clutch gearboxes were damaging, and soon those, what would have been a fantastic start for Ford to actually upgrade their owners from Fiesta to Focus, or no, the Mondeo or the likes of it, the whole thing just fall apart. And now you hardly see many Ford Fiestas around. So the Focus never really caught on, and the worst was the Mondeo. Mondeo is everybody said it's a good car, but nobody bought them. Right? And then there's the EcoSport, which I would say it is really not unpopular, because the selling price that the EcoSport occupies, you have the Honda HR-V, which basically Honda HR-V just grabbed the entire segment at its whims. So our impression of American cars aren't that positive, I would say, you know. And especially another thing is we read a lot of British magazines, okay. We have the locally franchised Top Gears, Autocar, Evo, and the likes of it. And the Brits, through their command of the English language, has successfully brainwashed a lot of us that American cars are shit. You know, the Brits actually, to me, that is a 20-year media campaign to talk bad about American cars. They talk bad about American drivers. They basically talk shit about American cars and American drivers. They were the ones who propagate the thinking or the notion that Americans can't drive. You know, in a lot of Asians' mindset, they perpetuated the perception that Americans only drive in straight lines. You know, even when they go racing, they only turn one direction. NASCAR and the likes of it. Okay, it is solely the fault of the British automotive media. And I think as a motoring journalist, I am sort of maybe I'm the only one, I'm not sure, but I never agreed with all this. I've been on a long-term campaign to tell people the greatest car culture is always America. You know, they have a circuit, they have a racetrack in almost every small town or bigger towns, and everybody races. And when it comes to car modifications, Americans are, nobody challenges the Americans when it comes to knowledge about cars, when it comes to modification, when it comes to car cultures. They race everything. They race cars, they race buses, trucks, lawnmowers, you name it, right? And there are people where their career is racing school buses. That's Americans, okay? To me, I hold Americans at the highest of regards when it comes to car culture. And I think there are a lot of great drivers as well. It's just that they sort of prefer their own way of they have their own racing series, you know, and it's so popular, it is so big, so competitive, that there's little need for them to compete per se internationally, you know. So US is like its own cluster of car culture. You know, what they like, we doesn't necessarily like. And yeah, basically they have their own. I wouldn't call it as the Americans are in their own bubble, because everybody has their own bubble, right? And so as I became more and more informed, I would say, in whatever that I'm doing, I began to prefer okay. So the conclusion is we don't really have a very good impression on American cars, and I think that's sad, because I think if I were to say that the Europeans who sort of invented the automobile, and then they were the ones who spearheaded the industry, you know, like how Carl Benz, the company Benz and C, made the first internal combustion engine equipped car. I wouldn't call them as the first who invented cars per se, because the French actually invented the first car, but the ones that the French made runs on steam, whereas what Carl Benz did runs on petrol, or what we call ICE engine, internal combustion engine. And then BMW's founder, I mean the guy who founded the company that became BMW, Nikolaus Otto, was the one who perfected the combustion engine, right? He sort of invented the 4-stroke combustion engine that now every car uses, right? So the Europeans, no doubt, they were the mover and shakers in you know, the early 20th century, and then the 1910s, 20, 30, 40, and sort of until the 40s and the 50s, when Europe was ravaged by war. It was the Americans that contributed to the advancement of the automobile greatly, right? In the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, the Americans dominated the car industry. The stuffs that they built, the kind of equipments they came up with, you know, airbags, powered seats, air-conditioned cars, turbine cars, you name it. All right, they were outrageous, they were daring. The Americans practically transformed the automobile from what we used to know, those really old stuff. Imagine a car from the 30s, right, to what we have now. So the modern car, in the modern car context, you know, where you have a key, you open the door, you comes in, there's a steering wheel, air conditioning, radio, leather seats, comfortable interior, powered seats, wipers and all this. These sort of modern cars actually were created by the Americans. That I would regard that as their contribution. And of course the Germans, after the war, they rebound really quickly. And of course, cars that no longer break down, you know, cars that are reliable, are the Japanese. So in this whole context, the British actually did nothing apart from hoity-toity luxury cars, you know, putting in leather, wood, really big cars, Rolls Royce, Bentley, the kind of aristocratic air to it. That's the Brits, okay? But did they do anything to the industry? I don't really think so. You know, the British Leylands, you know, the Triumphs, BMC and all that, I don't really think they contributed much. Of course, you have the Mini, alright? Yeah. So, what are some of the great American cars that I would regard as really, really awesome? Now, because of how we were brought up, I mean, the kind of media that we were exposed to, we have very little to know on those. What the? Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I think they have a lot of great cars, and especially Ford. I'll be honest with you, I know a lot of Americans love Chevrolet. You all swear by Chevrolets, right? Chevy. The more, I think, I may be wrong, but does Chevrolet associate themselves with American patriotism? Because that's probably what I get. You know, the kind of anyway. For me, Ford has a special place If for those of you who watch my reviews, you will always know that I always regard Ford as the god in suspension tuning. Of course, this is Ford European cars. Mondeo, Focus, Fiesta, Kuga, you name it, all of them has great suspension. I haven't driven any American only Fords, the Taurus, but I think after the One Ford strategy, they sort of aligned all their car models, right? Yeah, I've driven the Ford Mustang. It's nice, but I kind of find that it's a bit too civilized for my liking. I thought the Mustang is brute, is loud, is, you know, American V8. But when I drove the 5-liter V8, it's quiet, it's comfortable, it's very cramped inside, even though the car looks rather huge. I do not know how a 6-foot American sits in a Ford Mustang. I have no idea, because I'm only 5'11". I'm an Asian, of course, and my build is I'm a tiny guy in US, I would presume. I mean, if I'm not standing next to an Italian, but yeah. So Ford, to me, I really respect Ford. For those of you who didn't know, maybe you'll wonder why is Ferrari under Fiat, right? Ford has something to do about it. Of course, Ford and Porsche, I would say, because at one point Ford was talking about buying Ferrari, and the deal did not went through, and Ford was furious, and then they go like, let's build a car to beat Ferrari, you know, at their home turf, Le Mans, and they built the Ford GT. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this story. Then they built the Ford, what the fuck? A Mercedes C350E. Go and put a V8 bi-turbo badge there, but betrayed by the disc brakes and the stupid ride height of the car. The car rides on air suspension, right? the whole car looks like shit, but with the V8 logo. Anyway, yeah. So the Ford GT beat Ferrari, and then Ferrari was furious, and then came Ford Porsche 917. That car beat Ford as well, and then Ferrari decided they wanted to embark on a very ambitious project, the Ferrari 512, and since the homologation rules changed, he had to sell half of his company to fund the build of the 512, and that resulted in Ferrari being controlled by Fiat today. What a sad story, but I mean, they've been thriving, it's alright. Yeah, and then Ford has a lot of cars that I like that we don't get, unfortunately. I love the Ford Flex. I love that car. Okay, and I love the Ford 150. Again, that's because we're more exposed to Ford. That's why I prefer the Ford 150 than when I look at the new Chevrolet Silverado this morning. What the fuck is that? But I know, again, Chevy is very popular in US. What I heard is every town has a Chevy dealership, maybe. Apart from that, I love how the Ford Taurus looks, and so yeah, there are a lot of Fords that we don't get. The Ford F650, but that's basically a lorry. Yeah, if you're a Brit, you call it a lorry and not a truck. Anyway, what other great Fords? Okay, no one will not like the Corvette. Okay, the Corvette to me is just absolutely beautiful, and in fact, to me, the prettiest Corvette is actually the first one. The first one is just absolutely beautiful. It is stunning. That one to me is one of the most beautiful car ever designed in the world. Not the Jag E-Type, no. Again, the Jag E-Type and all that fad around it was perpetuated by the Brits again. I don't think the Jaguar E-Type is that beautiful compared to a lot of American cars. I learned about the Tucker from reading a lot of car stuff. To me, that is a revolutionary car, right? The Tucker. and it's beautiful as well. So what I want to say is Ford or any, oh, there's a Toyota FJ, the original FJ, and that's a copy of the Jeep Wrangler. You know, all these are affected by, I think, the American car industry. Okay, I guess I'm here. I'll just go down and look for, yes, I'm at the 4x4 shop, preparing my car for Borneo Safari. So, the kind of cars that I think I would love to drive would be, of course, the Ford GT if I get the chance, you know, and then Camaro. I've driven the Mustang. I would love to try a Cadillac. Why? Because when I look at all the car reviews from USA, I look at Cadillac interiors. They're beautiful, right? Even the cars are beautiful. And from my good friend Jack Baruth from Road and Track, he told me the CTS-V can outhandle most of the Germans. And if that in the British, you know, the British, they always they sort of they always say things like, oh, the Cadillacs are poorly built, you know, they're not luxurious enough. But on the other hand, they always try to tell us that Jaguars are, you know, almost like the next best thing. But when I drove a Jag, okay, I have to admit, they handle great. But other than that, other than a great handler, it has unsorted gearbox. Okay, that won't rule them out either, because Mercedes-Benz had a long decade of unsorted gearboxes. And interiors of Jaguars, they are worse than a Mazda. So if the Brits can see that a Cadillac is poorly built, why can't they see that a Jag is poorly built? So I do not trust them one bit. You know, they just sound more persuasive when they have a greater command of vocabularies, and they speak in a way that just makes them sound intelligent, so you sort of believe in them. But I'm not ruling everybody out. You know, there are a lot of great British journalists, Jethro Bovingdon, Henry Catchpole, they're all great.